Good afternoon and Happy New Year, and welcome to the final symposium of the year 2021, which also happens to be the last New Year's Eve symposium that we will have before the November election in 2022. So there's an enormous amount to do to gear up for this campaign. 2022 also happens to be the centennial year of the birth of Lyndon LaRouche, who was born September 8th, 1922. And we intend to make this a victorious year for LaRouche in the United States and internationally. I have a few things that I would like to say, especially just we will be going to a video of a meeting that I held in 2013 when I was running for governor against Chris Christie, which features some old friends of ours, one Lyndon LaRouche, but also the late Congressman Neil Gallagher. But I'll get to that in a minute. I'd like to introduce my colleague and partner on so many of these programs, Dennis Speed.
How are you, Diane?
I'm fine, ready.
Yeah, well, we want to say to everybody that has been watching these programs and been involved that we want to thank you for your involvement. We also want to inspire you to think about getting a lot of other people involved. Of course, this is a political campaign, an independent political campaign at a time of crisis, at a time where people don't really know where their next day is coming from, put it like that, or where their next crisis is coming from. They know there will be one. They know there will be one every day. The thing that's become challenging for many Americans is to think about what their role would be or should be when confronted with the kind of monumental challenges. I mean, a pandemic, a global pandemic, last time that was seen was back in 1917-18 with the great flu pandemic of that period. But this one, of course, is much different because it has many different components to it. It's compounded also with the fact that you're in a post-nuclear world since 1945, and the tensions among nations that also are being exhibited in the context of something like a global pandemic mean that many of the ideological presuppositions of the way that people organize their lives will have to be challenged in order for us to survive this. And just as an example, we clearly need globally an international food and health program, a platform. We need hospitals and nurses and doctors and medicines and clean water and food all over the world. And any place that doesn't have it becomes an immediate possible location for danger for the whole human race. Because the nature of pandemics is that the mutations of viruses, or for that matter, bacteriological based diseases, threaten everyone when a new strain, a new mutation occurs. And the only way to be able to deal with that is to make sure everybody's protected. But how do you do that? Because you're talking about a frontier of science. This happens to also be talking about anniversaries or conditions or situations that should be commemorated. The 200th anniversary of the birth of Louis Pasteur as well, and his work at the frontiers of biology, chemistry, medicine, and fundamentally, in one sense, physics. His work in France partially should be cited just as an example of how to go about the actions of public sanitation and public health. But what does this really mean? It also challenges the presuppositions around economic wealth that we've thought about for a long time. The US used to be based on physical economy and was based on a conception of advancing mankind, not merely advancing the general well-being of the citizens of the United States. And the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution have guaranteed that. But what we've seen, particularly since last year, is an erosion of, in fact, almost an abdication of the process of electoral politics as a deliberative process where the citizens bring forward policies and proposals, which are then picked up by a candidate or candidates. And these candidates then engage the country in a process of debate about the direction. Instead, we know what we've seen, what has been substituted. I'm not going to spend any time trying to characterize that because Diane's campaign is the antidote to what we all have seen. The issue is that independent people who have no political axe to grind need to get into this process, but they need to get into the process from the standpoint of taking a principle of what we're going to call the physical principle of economic power, not money, not who you happen to know, not cheating, not looting, and also not systems like communism or socialism, the way that these things are thought about. The American system was none of that. It was never named capitalist. Capitalist is actually a word from a French socialist named Louis Blanc, who invented that word in the 1850s. It didn't exist at the time that Alexander Hamilton started the bank. We started the national bank, that is, our credit system, or any of the actual productivity that created the modern American economy. It was never called capitalism. And it's not what got disintegrated over the past 40 years is communism. That doesn't work either. It's something completely different. Diane has been associated, as she's told you many times, with Lyndon LaRouche ever since the 1980s, his 1988 presidential campaign. And LaRouche's role in helping Americans and nations like China or Russia understand this idea of physical productivity as the basis for actual wealth generation is something that is in the soil of America. It's what built America. It's the way that Americans always thought. It's why New York City was a great city. And what we're really trying to do is to remind people of that tradition and show them one other element of that tradition, which is that non-professional political figures or non-professional, just persons who are citizens step up, and they are the source of the deliberative process. They are the source of the change. And that's what I think this campaign has done very successfully in the last year. And I guess we have some highlights from some of the things that Diane did, which we're going to be showing you. And again, we just want to encourage everybody to help us. We have a very specific set of tasks. We'll probably get more into that a little bit, but I'll just say this. We're petitioning. We're going to have to petition to get Diane on the ballot. It's an absurd requirement of 45,000 valid signatures. We're trying to get hundreds of people to volunteer. We'd like you to do that. Get in touch with the campaign. There'll be things on your screen that will tell you how to do that. We're involved in doing phone calls today about this, so you can get to us right after this broadcast, at least up until sometime this afternoon. And we just would urge everyone to think in terms of what we used to call the Manhattan Project, and is still called the Manhattan Project. The notion of an impossible task which can be performed because of the collaboration of people that decide that the impossible is necessary. So in the case of this campaign, the impossible is necessary. That's the way we will reestablish the integrity of the electoral process here in the state of New York and throughout the United States. So Diane, back to you for whatever you're going to have us do here.
Great, thank you. Well, I just wanted to situate where we are, which is that, as Lyndon LaRouche warned, since the 1950s, the transatlantic financial and economic system has reached its end. And he warned that if you go for the so-called post-industrial economy or the service economy combined with the rock, drug, sex counterculture, which is now no longer the counterculture, but is the culture, that you would have a collapse, a moral, spiritual, physical collapse. We are seeing that now in the transatlantic world. The pandemic simply exposed what was already there, which are supply lines collapsed at a drop of a pin, that we don't have water management, transportation, basic healthcare infrastructure. China built, I think, 2,000 hospitals in the last 2 years. The United States closed 200 hospitals in the last 2 years. Just as a comparison, do we actually value the lives of people in this nation? Are we upholding the principles of the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution? Not recently. Now, because of the bankruptcy of this gigantic bubble of derivatives, which is held largely in the City of London and at Wall Street, you have a kind of desperate move for power by these banks, pushing us, one, toward a shutdown of fossil fuels and therefore energy, and toward major blackouts, brownouts, which will affect the livelihood of billions of people on the planet. And you have a drive for war. So yesterday, Presidents Biden and Putin had a conversation for about 50 minutes. What many Americans may be unaware of is that the United States has right now 4,000 troops in Ukraine. It's part of a NATO deployment there of 10,000 troops. But the Obama-Biden administration created these conditions when they and the National Endowment for so-called Democracy, used to be handled by the CIA, these activities, funded a coup in Ukraine to the tune of $5 billion, where the elected government was removed and a neo-Nazi government was installed. You now have this character, Zelensky, and people should remember that President Donald Trump could not even have a private conversation with the president of that nation. Americans do not know, thanks to our media, what the Russians are saying, although the New York Post finally admitted that they are likening the crisis to the Cuban Missile Crisis in reverse, because this time it is the United States that is moving continuously further east, even when James Baker III, as Secretary of State, and President Ronald Reagan gave assurances to Gorbachev and other Russian leaders that NATO would not move 1 inch to the east if Germany was allowed to reunify in an incredible peaceful movement. So we are actually on the brink of a very dangerous war situation with Russia. There are similar provocations being waged against China. It is not the case that Russia is planning to invade Ukraine by any means. But if you have a regime in Kiev which is shelling and bombing civilian populations in the Donbass and Lugansk because they are ethnically Russian, Putin already said that he would not allow ethnic cleansing of the 500,000 speaking Russian people in those republics, now newly independent breakaway republics. Similarly, Crimea was not invaded by Russia. They held a referendum. Crimea is over 90% Russian, especially after the Odessa horrible massacre in 2014, where Russian-speaking people were rounded up by these neo-Nazis into a labor building, which was boarded up and set on fire, and they burned to their deaths. The people of Crimea held a referendum and voted 97% to leave Ukraine and rejoin the Russian Federation. That's the truth of this. We get none of this in the US, and we have people like Senator Schumer, who not only lies and lies and lies repeatedly, but votes for every single sanction against Russia, introduces very vicious McCarthyite legislation against China. If we're going to solve the problems that Dennis just elaborated, the United States, China, and Russia must have good relations, and we have to collaborate on these things. But what I wanted to get at finally, and what's the topic of the video we're going to watch, this video comes from 2013. It's a meeting that was held by my campaign for governor when I was in New Jersey. I was running as an independent candidate against Governor Chris Christie, and I was really honored to have, by video and phone hookup, Lyndon LaRouche and the late Congressman Neil Gallagher, who passed away in 2018. Congressman Gallagher had fought his entire life and career in the Congress to end the secret government, to end the surveillance state. He became very alarmed when he learned of certain activities by the FBI to spy on people and manipulate them. There's a great deal more. You'll hear a lot of it in this discussion. And what I wanted to say is that 2022 has to be the year that we end this secret government. General Michael Flynn was probably targeted for a number of reasons, but perhaps the biggest one was that apparently he wanted to audit the intelligence agencies, the 17 intelligence agencies that were working so hard to get warmonger Hillary Clinton elected. That could not be allowed to happen. As I said, President Trump could not even have a private conversation with any head of state. And now President Biden, who seems to be trying to pull us back from the brink, but it's not clear whether he will be allowed to do that or who even runs this administration. And that's the problem that other governments must deal with when considering their security. They can't tell who runs the United States. Is it the FBI? Is it this crazy Senator Roger Wicker from Mississippi who said we should rain destruction on Russia and not rule out the first use of nuclear weapons over Ukraine, which is not an ally of ours? Who runs this nation? So, as Dennis said, my campaign is dedicated to returning the governance of this nation to the consent of the governed. That means cleaning up the elections, but it means emphatically cleaning up this secret government apparatus, which Schumer himself personally represents, as we heard when he threatened Trump that you can't go after the intelligence agencies because they have 6 ways from Sunday to get back at you. And I would like to just name a few people here who need to be exonerated and allowed to return safely to the United States and to live, or to their country in the case of Julian Assange. Australia, how can he be guilty of treason against the United States or the Espionage Act? He's not a US citizen. He didn't steal secrets. He wasn't spying. He was a journalist. He covered material which was leaked to him. Ed Snowden, who found it against his conscience that we were doing massive data collection on the American people. David Hale, differently, but who it weighed on his conscience to be operating drones, killing people who were not particularly committing crimes hundreds or thousands of miles away. These are all anti-American actions, and these people blew the whistle because they presumed that there was a conscience among the American people that would reject this. We have not gotten to the bottom of the assassinations of both of the Kennedys, President John F. Kennedy and his younger brother, Robert Kennedy, who would have been president, Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, and finally, I'll just say, the man whose 100-year anniversary of his birth, the late Lyndon LaRouche, who passed away in 2019, but who was born in 1922, who was vilified, called every name in the book, sent to prison to prevent him from becoming president of the United States. Had Lyndon LaRouche been allowed to be president of the United States, we would already be living on a fusion energy platform. We would not have mass starvation all over the planet, and we would not have had perpetual war for the last 25 and 50 years. So with that, I would like us to take a step back 8 years ago and watch excerpts from this meeting. You'll see myself as a candidate for governor at the time, 2013, in New Jersey, joined by Bruce Todd of New Jersey, who was running for lieutenant governor. And we will hear from Lyndon LaRouche and Neil Gallagher. And I think you'll be surprised how prescient they were and how much relevance their messages have for what we have to do today.
Say some more about you. One more thing about Diane, which is, to speak for myself on the matter, that what you're seeing here, we're going to hear from a 92-year-old Gallagher and a 91-year-old LaRouche, who represent the leadership of this nation. in the World War II post-war period, in the Kennedy period and to the present. We're going to hear from Bruce, who is really a worker intellectual of my generation, the boomer generation. And then we're going to hear from Diane, who represents both a leader of a younger generation in the country and a leader of an emerging youth generation. Diane spends much of her time developing the leadership of this movement, the new young leadership of this movement and of the nation. Diane?
Well, today's meeting, I think, will prove to have been a very important turning point in the history not only of New Jersey, but in the development of mankind. And the significance of this event has little to do with my campaign for governor 1 week before the election, but has to do with the future of civilization. I was not alive when John F. Kennedy was President of the United States. But I was alive when we landed on the moon, and in 1972, at the age of 6, I and my classmates were old enough to follow that last manned landing of the moon quite intensely. And every 6- and 7-year-old in my class knew the planets, the orbits of the planets, where they were in the solar system. We all knew that a piece of the rocket had to fall off when the rocket went through the atmosphere. And we took it for granted that this landing on the moon was just the early phase of human exploration of the solar system and beyond. What a different outlook and sense of purpose from what our children are living today. Everyone has been horrified this week by the stories of 12 and 14-year-old children murdering their teachers. And this, which is a whole other story, I don't think should be in the news media. I think it's outrageous and it spreads, which is the intent, but nonetheless. We have right now a totally different cultural and moral outlook. And people are reflecting on this today because this year, November 22nd, marks the 50th anniversary of the assassination of President Kennedy. How does one measure optimism? Is it round? Is it square? Is it pointed? Does it smell bad? Is it heavy? Is it light? Well, you could argue that optimism makes heavy burdens light. Why? Now, I wanted to look back at a different trend of American leaders, starting with the Bush family. Take Prescott. Prescott Bush, censured by the US Congress for aiding the Nazis in World War II. He was a fanatical supporter of the eugenics movement. He was the treasurer for Planned Parenthood because he wanted to make sure that we weren't just killing unborn babies of the superior races, but we really had to eliminate the impoverished races, and therefore you needed a lot of money to make sure that people in the less desirable classes had access to abort themselves. Then you had H.W. Bush, who continued in this tradition, who brought the eugenicists Shockley and Jensen into the US Congress. And then you had W. Bush, who continued this tradition, although he wasn't as bright, so he had Dick Cheney running things. But look at the policies. You had Iran-Contra, secret government. We had 9/11, and a continuing apparatus of cover-up of the Saudi and Anglo-Saudi role in 9/11 under the W. Bush administration, continued under Obama, and it was this Bush legacy that put Governor Chris Christie into office. Now, this spectacularly rotten train in American history has reached a new low with Barack Obama, who began his term by coming up with the Hitler-modeled Tiergarten fear healthcare system of eliminating the useless eaters, but it will save the insurance companies a lot of money. And then we have the drug running tradition continued in the Fast and Furious operation. And then, as people may know, today there is a large demonstration in Washington, D.C. because of the NSA Dragnet wiretapping, where now we are turning anyone that we still had left in the world as an ally, which isn't that many people, against us, because it turns out we're now spying on all of them. Did you ever think that we would have a sitting president who is not in the process of being impeached, who holds weekly meetings to decide who he's going to kill with drone assassinations, and he never has to state the cause? The United States has strayed from its mission as intended by the founders. But like Lyndon LaRouche and like Congressman Neil Gallagher, I believe that the American people have enough goodness and courage that if the right leadership presents itself to them, they will fight. Today, this war cannot be won with guns and tanks, but with the power of the truth. And that's the significance of the meeting this afternoon, not the November 5th election. But this meeting will be one of a series of gatherings this year where we are going to finally close the door on the 50-year dark age, which began with the murder of our president. And we are going to resume the actual business of the United States of America. Thank you.
Bruce Todd has spent most of his last 40 years fixing everything as a millwright, as a highly skilled millwright in nuclear plants and every other plant. And happily, in the last period, he's made the decision to work on fixing the world. Here he is.
Good afternoon. I'm going to be very brief because I know there's many things that need to be done here today and after today. I want to just add a little bit to what Diane said about the Kennedy administration, because most people are not aware that they had not just identified with the space program a crucial area of development that needed to go on, which served a couple purposes. First off, it actually rallied the American people to that idea, to that continuing idea that came out of the American Revolution, that you had a government whose sole purpose was to benefit the people of that nation. And the space program was just part of that. It identified the crucial areas that had to be conquered to be able to allow us to take a person from this planet, put him on the moon, and bring him back. Not the easiest thing in the world to do, because you had to conquer everything from electronics, from chemical processes. Just getting off the planet, getting to the moon and getting back required a huge amount of energy. But they were able to conquer that. They were able to develop the computer capability. They were able to develop the electronics, the satellite system, the monitoring system, all of which was required to do that. And it led to further developments down the line that we see today, that if you're walking anywhere, people take for granted. You know, whether it's your cell phone, could be anything from paints, radial tires on your car, you name it. And those were some of the benefits that came out of the space program. A space program that actually was halted in a large respect within the first 10 years of its development, and never allowed to fully develop, like, for example, Kennedy's idea of a nuclear-powered spacecraft that would be capable of taking us far beyond what we could do in getting to the moon and back. Because beyond that, we weren't really capable of doing it. I just want to say a little bit more. because contrary to that policy, you have, for example, the policy of Chris Christie and Barack Obama. You know, people know that from Hurricane Sandy and what has resulted from that and what should have been done more than 2 decades ago, which was to protect the people of the nation with a proper storm barrier, pumping system, dune system, whatever it was required to do that, so that people don't have to worry about raising their houses 12 feet off the ground. Crazily, you know. But all those things could have been done and should have been done if we didn't have a government that was basically run by Wall Street for the benefit of a few. And that's what we need to do today. We have to make that commitment as a nation to redevelop that idea of the nation being committed to the future for its people, and the people understanding it's their responsibility to make sure that nation carries that forward. And I'm going to leave it really with that, because there's many questions people are going to have about that, policy questions, etc. And we'll gladly answer anybody's question about that. So I thank you.
In any case, we have Neil on the hookup, and I think Lynn is on the island. So, Neil, I think with that introduction, why don't you go ahead?
Okay. Well, certainly, Elliot, it's a great pleasure to speak with you and to your group, who I long admired. And what I said about Diane, she is a great candidate. I'm very pleased, and I want to thank Lyndon LaRouche for his kind words about my career. It's especially meaningful coming from such a young man, much more my junior than I am. Though most of the people who are senior to me don't seem to be answering their cell phones, since most of them are under grass these days. So, Lynn, I want to thank you very, very much, and I wish you good health and continued success.
Well, I'm honored to have a chance to speak to you, even in this mechanism, as opposed to a more direct contact. But
we'll do that soon.
Yes, yes.
I
think
certainly want to compliment you, Lynn, for and your great associates like Elliot and Michael and Jeff Steinberg, and the people who have been associated with your efforts down through the years. And like yourself, you've led a fight for a better America, certainly for such a long time, and under the horrible conditions few Americans can understand unless they go up against it, such as Mike went under. And it's against the secret government, really, a government within a government that is now, I don't know, part of the great secret as to who really runs America. America owes a great debt of gratitude, I think, to you, Lynn, which you fully, whether we fully agree with all you said or not, you have been a courageous statesman who has always been in the forefront of what was needed in America at a time when few people were paying attention to what really has been happening to our government. You've given a wellspring of hope to people in our country and around the world as our government goes on its merry way in an imperial way, questioning the very essence of freedom and privacy. So before I say anything, I certainly want to say thank you for your efforts down through the years that I have admired, and people like Elliot has kept me abreast of it, and the great work that you and your associates have done. So to talk this way, I wish we were in person, but one of these days we certainly will.
Well, that's very nice idea.
They say I got a little chop in the head yesterday, and it made me unable to come down there yesterday.
Well,
and Diane, I want to wish Diane the best of luck in her campaign. She certainly is an outstanding person who has shown intelligence and concern and has been a rare commodity in public life today. She's the kind of serious person with an empathy for people that is sorely lacking in today's politics. She's kind, and I wish her well, and I wish her future success that I'm sure that she will have. And she brings great credit to American politics today. I don't know really, Elliot, where to start and where to end, but if I could take a few minutes, I think most of the things that are going on today, what's going on in Washington, what you're meeting, the continuing efforts of Lynn's group, and that privacy, it's one of those things people put a bumper sticker on once in a while, like support our troops. In the meantime, nobody knows what our troops are doing or why they're doing it, except all we know if people are getting killed over there. The recognition they get is a bumper sticker or a free seat at the Yankees once in a while. So that's not enough. I think privacy is an all-encompassing word that includes not only our private life and intrudes on it, but our relationship to society, our friends and neighbors, and all of our government and its relationships to our ability to be in a school, to get a job, our health and our dying, and informers with the great armies of informers, with probably in an afterlife of government intrusion into our descendants. It's a scary, scary time. On a larger scale, we have the NSA and related secret police agencies. At one count, on one study, there was sometime last year when I read there were over 70 secret police agencies. Everybody has a police agency in its department, spying on each other. And who are the victims? The American public. Then you have former NSA directors and thousands of them, and they're junior spooks, thousands of them working for various high-power consultancy firms or fixed-it organizations and making a buck up there, but they're all informers. Privacy, it's a buzzword for much that is going on that cannot be explained in a few words. I think privacy is a commodity, has become a commodity that has been monetized for profit and power, for careers and pensions and consultancies, and the selling of secrets for profits. Spy, sorry, what you want to show. For instance, Snowden, everybody's pillarizing now. Snowden is one of the few people in the intelligence world that is not in it for a buck, as so many thousands of other former spooks are involved in the information racket, which is what really it has become. I don't know. We see values, our freedoms and liberties are constantly challenged by great technologies that are not empowering the American citizen, but are empowering the federal law enforcement agencies that sometimes behave and sometimes they don't. But what it is modifying the behavior of not only the American the American people, but the American elected officials. Everybody likes acronyms. Well, federal law enforcement agencies spells out the fleas. Yeah, are we a flea-bitten nation that is spreading unrest not only here in America, but around the world, where we have military or intelligence presence in over 120 countries? What the hell is the purpose? To create new crisis, so that new enemies can be spied upon and spend more money in the intelligence complex in America? One of the things that troubles me, and listen, Ellie, you can shut me up anytime you want. One of the things that troubles me is, I remember General Powell saying that what you need before you go into a war is an exit strategy. What is the exit strategy of the war on terror? It certainly cannot be fleets of drones killing Arabs, Muslims ad infinitum. I recall speaking to President Kennedy and President Johnson about this guy Hoover, because it was a cancer in the Congress, not only in the legislation I was involved in, but anything that came up in the Judiciary Committee and the Appropriations Subcommittee on appropriations for Justice Department. I remember asking Kennedy, why don't you fire this guy? This is a terrible man. They all hated him. And he said, well, we're going to get him in the second term. We couldn't do it in the first term. Well, of course, there was no second term. I always thought that the hand of that guy was involved in there not being a second term. I even spoke to President Johnson, who I became quite friendly with. And I said, why do we keep this guy intimidating everybody in Washington? And I'll never forget, his answer was, it's better to have him in the tent urinating out than being out the tent urinating on the tent. This was the mentality of the chilling effect of Hoover's information in his files. Now multiply that by 1,000.
Neil, you just got your second standing ovation, and this one was also for Lynn.
Great. Great. I appreciate that. And Lynn, I'm sorry imposing on your time, but I just wanted to be part of your meeting, and it's an honor to be on the same program with you and your friends.
We have a certain special kind of affinity because of what we've gone through as well as our relevant ages.
That's right.
We're now in a position that we might hope that we might live to see the proper conclusion to these episodes we've been going through all these years.
Yes, I hope so. You know, Lynn, I don't know that we'll see the proper conclusion, but it would be nice to see a real beginning towards some conclusion that might save what we all thought was the true spirit of America.
Well, my view is rather elementary. I believe that we have to create the future, whether we are able to live through it or not.
Yes, I agree with that.
That's the genius of mankind, to be able to do that. I think we are in a position where it becomes possible, and it depends upon the mobilization of people around us, whether it's possible to push this thing to an end, to get the Obama administration out of office, because I believe at this point that were Obama to be removed from office now, and that's a likely prospect, not a certainty, but a likely prospect. If he's dumped from office, which would be the blessed thing to happen at this point, then we would have an opportunity, as mankind had never had before, for a long time, to get back our nation and to get back the kind of world which will be, because of various considerations, like war has got to come to an end, because the means of warfare, which are thermonuclear in their nature, are such that the first one who starts that kind of war is going to kill everyone.
Yes, I agree with that.
Therefore, we must dedicate ourselves to those means made available to us to provide a kind of stimulus of leadership inside the United States and around the world We see that happening. We see it in Russia, we see it in various other nations, in China. We see a mobilization of nations to try to resist this thing that's coming out of this Anglo-Dutch nonsense, which we're fighting against today.
Right.
And the idea we have a known enemy, we know the enemy is, we know the enemy has to be defeated. It's the old Anglo-Dutch swindle, which has been the pestilence of mankind for a long time.
Yeah,
And I think the time has come, so I wouldn't recommend pessimism. I wouldn't.
No, I'm not pessimistic. I still have hope that the people get a hold of it.
I think we can win, but I think it takes every bit of juice in us to add enough force to ensure that we win.
Yeah, I agree with that. You know, just one thing I would say, as far as President Obama, I'm not sure that any president has any control over anything anymore, that we have not now in the hands of the various agencies who control the information. But I don't know. I think this is something that we've really got to take a look at. Who really runs who really runs this country?
Neil?
General Dow residing in Moscow, or in Moscow's vicinity, who was formerly an agent of an agency of the United States, and is in spirit is still a committed agent of the United States, of the real United States, not the Obama United States. And therefore we are warriors. We are warriors, and we live and we die. But what our mission in life does not end with our life. We must dedicate ourselves to that result. And
I fully agree with you on that, Lynn. And let us work together and hope that we see the thing through.
Good.
And listen, stay alive and stay healthy.
Well, I shall do that to the best of my ability.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Neil, thank you. Lynn?
Yes.
Go ahead.
Oh, you want some more from me, huh? Okay. I'm sort of prepared.
We would like some more from you.
Okay. Well, let's talk about the crisis, but let's talk about the good news first. We are now in our little organization down here where I am now. We are working on a program of thermonuclear fusion to launch that as the policy of the United States and other nations now, and to put that into motion now. If Obama is eliminated from the presidency, and there are many ways he could be eliminated for this cause or that cause or whatever, but if we eliminate him, or he's dropped out because of his own follies, we have a new opportunity which we have to seize. There are opportunities involving other nations, major nations, Russia, China, India, so forth, and that sort of thing. But there are also the things that we could do. We are on the verge of the capability, with certain changes in our political structure right now, to launch a thermonuclear fusion program which would change the surface of this earth and beyond. That it will take us probably a dozen years or so to get a thermonuclear fusion program going on. But as we know in many of these processes in past, that when you get something started and you keep it going is far different than waiting for the opportunity to bring it on. So what we have to do now is commit ourselves to bringing on what must be brought on in terms of such things as thermonuclear fusion. With the opportunity, to describe it summarily, is we can use the technologies at our beck. We can use these technologies in such a way as to create a new system of economy. And it's time to do that. If we get rid of some of the problems we have, we typified by Obama, but also people who went before him. In that case, we have a new opening for the United States, not just the United States, but the world. Now, what I'm working on is the fact that what we need is to combine the idea of a water system for the United States, particularly from the Mississippi River on westward, but actually carrying that through thermonuclear fusion, to carrying that across the Pacific Ocean into Asia itself. And this kind of program, within a dozen years, could be realized. And this kind of action, this kind of volitional action, is exactly what we need. And I say that the evidence is that the solution is possible, and it's highly recommended. We can get out of the doghouse that we've been living in for too long. We can realize that we have the ability in coordinated efforts to bring on that change, to establish the basis for a thermonuclear fusion program, which is the solution for the entire Pacific region. It's a solution for all the United States west of the Mississippi River, and similarly. And these things are there for us. But the key thing is you have to understand that those potentials exist, because it's only through our concerted efforts that what is potential can be made real. And that's my essential message. If you have any questions, I'd be glad to answer them. Yes, well, the point is, in life, we all know that we're all going to die eventually. So the question is, what is your purpose in living? And that's how you should have to define your life if you want to have a successful estimation of what you should be doing. And therefore, we are in a situation where we have to actually take certain measures of improvement. This thermonuclear fusion idea is typical of that. But they stuck me in prison, but they didn't really kill me. And I have not been disabled in doing what I was doing beforehand. The difficulties have been thrown in my way, but you expect difficulties in life. Well, I was guilty of nothing, but the powers that would be associated with the Bush family, for example, who's been my enemy for a very long time, beginning with the Prescott Bush, who backed Hitler. And that's the Bush family. It's with a Hitler commitment tradition. No wonder I had problems with these characters. I was working against the Hitler group, but it wasn't just Hitler. It was this whole crowd, the Anglo-Dutch crowd, which was doing these things, including running Hitler. So therefore, when you're in life, you can't gamble that you personally are going to be enabled to create the action which is necessary for mankind. What you have to concern yourself with is what it is you must commit yourself to, and with what form and what capability. And so they throw me into prison. So what? It can happen to anyone in almost any country, things like that. But the key thing is, don't give in. Don't collapse. Fight, but learn how to fight intelligently and to a proper mission. Fighting for yourself is sometimes the most foolish thing you can do, because you can accomplish more by taking the same power and using it for other purposes. And that's my situation. Look, I'm 91 years of age. That's not exactly a ripe youth, you know what I say? But therefore, my whole purpose in life is based on what I can help to create to happen. And all wise people who have really become wise don't depend upon their own life as such. They depend upon what their life in process can contribute to mankind. And I think that's the truth of mankind. And it's the truth that mankind must find in themselves. Otherwise, they will lack the strength to deal with the great menaces which can hit humanity and have before. And that's my view. You have to take leadership to effect what is necessary for mankind. And once you deviate from that objective, particularly in a conflict like I've gone through, you lose. You lose because you threw yourself away. The mission is that you're going to die anyway, but you want to accomplish something by having lived. And that's what you must fight for. Because when people start to fight only for themselves, of how can I solve my problem, they lose. It's when they find themselves in solidarity with other people to bring about a common end for the benefit of mankind. Then you become a powerful force. That's what I believe, that's what I do, that's the way I act.
Great. Thanks. It's really wonderful to hear from Lyndon LaRouche, and very timely. So I just would, want to really urge everyone to work with us. A couple people who should be named. Elliot Greenspan, who you saw there, was the moderator of that meeting. a long-term collaborator of myself and Dennis. Also, my co-candidate, Joel DeJean, who is running as a LaRouche independent for Congress in Texas, who is a fanatical proponent of fusion energy, which we've had a number of breakthroughs on in spite of the dark age-like conditions. We are seeing certain scientific breakthroughs like the launching of the Webb telescope, which is not yet to the end of its 29 days and able to unfurl. The breakthroughs in fusion, where we're getting 70% of inputted energy coming out, maybe even we're approaching 100%. It's moving quickly. There are breakthroughs coming on breakthroughs. But there is a great deal to be lost because of the desperation of this bankrupt system. And that's what we are going to concentrate on. And that's why Senator Schumer has to be not only removed from the Senate, but what he represents has to be completely crushed in this country. And I urgently need your help, both in terms of volunteers to help petition and to donate. Dennis, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Well, I think a few things should also be noted. Today does mark the final day in office of Mayor Mike de Blasio. Some have characterized him as the worst mayor in America in any city ever. Maybe that's a little bit harsh, but his sort of Jussie Smollett approach to policy in New York is an important thing to sort of recognize as going out the door. It's an approach that a lot of people, unfortunately, largely in the Democratic Party, took to a lot of things on policy. And what's interesting, I think, about what you heard Lynn say there at the end about the character of life, that's the inverse method to the way in which people have tried to govern and tried to get elected. They have tried to say what they think is plausible or viable in a particular circumstance. And people are rejecting that. When you see Vladimir Putin and Joe Biden have the conversation, even though we don't know exactly what was said, but we know the nature of the conversation, we are brought back to the reality of the circumstance that we live in. And I'd like to, just so people are clear about why Neil Gallagher, who is really a legendary figure in America on these questions that today are very much associated with things like the trial of Julian Assange or with what happened at the National Security Agency, what Bill Binney and others challenged. But Cornelius Gallagher was exposing these things back in 1969 and 1970. And he was trying to fight a very lonely fight at that time. Matter of fact, some of us became aware of Cornelius Gallagher before we were aware of Lyndon LaRouche because of the way in which he figured back at that time. When you hear him talk about Lyndon LaRouche's contributions, it's important to realize that another figure that died this year, Ramsey Clark, characterized the LaRouche trial. The trial happened in 1987 through 88, first in Boston, and then another trial happened in Alexandria, Virginia in 1988 at the end of the year. And Ramsey Clark characterized that process as a broader range of deliberate and systemic misconduct and abuse of power over a longer period of time in an effort to destroy a political movement and leader than any other federal prosecution in my time or to my knowledge. Now, Ramsey Clark was Attorney General of the United States back in 1967. And in one of the final conversations I had with him, he talked extensively about how he would periodically have breakfast over at J. Edgar Hoover's, not because he liked to go, but because that was a certain kind of requirement of his job. And so he was very familiar with these figures that, including the Kennedy brothers. And so he had seen every form of prosecution, every form of blackmail from the McCarthy era on. That's how he characterized the situation around Lyndon LaRouche. I think it's important, therefore, that what you just saw in what was being that dialogue between those two individuals, Lyndon LaRouche and Neil Gallagher, is a dialogue from a time in American history which was the precursor to the thing we're living in now. And I think that the independent candidacy that Diane is conducting, which is intended to be a kind of template for what we want people all over the country to aspire to do, is the way to get that America back. Lyndon LaRouche was talking there about the fusion program, and of course, Joel Jajan, who's running down in Texas, who has a background in nuclear engineering, is really very much pushing that. Think about this issue of climate change and the fraud that you've heard around that, because there was a crash program we can do around that, and we're capable of doing, and being capable of doing for the last 50 years in this country, which is the way that we would have solved these problems that people claim to exist. And so the only way this will come out is with independent candidacies being supported by an independent thinking American people. And so I just think it's important as we close out the year for everybody to think about how, if this candidacy in New York against Chuck Schumer, who's a big supporter of the nearly infinite employees of the intelligence agencies, there's 17 of them that people admit to exist, and they have tens of thousands of people working in every unit. And who says, there's 6 ways to Sunday in which these people come after you. Well, we went through that. Diane joined the organization, became involved with Lyndon LaRouche at the point when that fight was at its height during 1987-88. That says something about the qualifications of a candidate, because you're running into a burning building. Some of us remember that from the World Trade Center. And in politics, there's a form of that too. That's what she did. And it's the ability to bring the American people into that kind of fight, because you're in that kind of fight right now. It takes courage, but it also takes leadership, because a lot of people who may have the courage don't know what to do. And I just think that it's important as we close out to just point out that you're able to work with us and to join a fight where veterans of the fight for decades have paved the way for us to be victorious. We're not only talking about an elective position, we're talking about the constitutional nature of this country and your work to help preserve that. And so a good New Year's resolution, since people will be making them tonight, would be to make sure to do everything possible to get Diane elected in November of 2022, and to build the necessary campaign machine to do that, not merely as some kind of a campaign effort, but a way of recommitting the United States to its true nature as a constitutional republic.
Thank you very much, Dennis. So I think with that, we will conclude. Happy New Year. Thank you very much for supporting my efforts, and please support them more vigorously if you are not doing everything that you can yet. There's a lot hanging on this, and we'll be seeing you in the new year.